Get ready for a story that will grab your heart and not let go. This isn't just a tale. It's a journey into the quiet strength of a man who faced hell and came back changed, but not broken. Prepare for moments of unexpected kindness, harsh betrayal, and a fight for what's right that will leave you on the edge of your seat. Stay right here to find out what happens. Like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. These are the stories that give you chills. The road shimmered under the late afternoon sun. Heat waves rose like ghosts over the cracked asphalt. A battered Peterbilt 379 rumbled slowly into the sleepy town of Milford. It coughed smoke with every mile. Its once bright red paint had long faded into rust and dust. Every dent on the hood told a story, but none louder than the man inside. John Everett's hands gripped the steering wheel. His knuckles, sun-scorched and scarred, were tense. This was the kind of tension that stays long after a battle ends. The rest of him sat still, motionless like a statue made of flesh, bone, and grief. His eyes were shielded behind scratched aviators. He scanned the town in silence, like a general surveying unfamiliar terrain. Milford wasn't much. A gas station with a flickering sign, a diner with one car parked out front. On the far side of Main Street, a garage. It had a rusty blue sign that read, Weller's Auto Repair. As the truck rolled to a stop, the engine gave a dry cough, then went still. A long exhale, then silence. John stepped down slowly. His boots landed heavily on the sun-baked gravel. Dust rose around him. His jacket, a weathered army green, was stitched with fading insignias. Half-torn Velcro patches adorned it. It looked like it hadn't been washed since Cobble Creek. Inside the garage, the music was loud, something electronic and bass-heavy. 3 young mechanics lounged in the shade. They leaned over a busted Mustang. They were laughing over a phone video. They barely looked up as John approached. He stopped a few feet from them. He cleared his throat. "Truck's dead," he said plainly. His voice was gravelly low. "Could use some help." One of them was a lanky guy. He had tattoos. A mop of blonde hair was tucked under a backwards cap. He looked over his shoulder and smirked. "Yeah, got an appointment?" John stared at him, his expression unreadable. "No." Another shorter mechanic wore grease-stained coveralls. Earbuds dangled from his ears. He didn't even look up. "We're booked, man. Maybe next week." There was no hostility, just disinterest. The kind that stings more than open rejection. John gave a slight nod. No protest, no begging. He just turned slow and quiet. He started back toward his truck. But then a glint, a sharp ray of sun cut through the garage. It struck the front bumper of John's rig. Something flashed. Not chrome, not paint. Something metal and unmistakable. It was hanging just below the license plate. A bronze plaque. Dulled by weather, but still legible. Medal of Honor recipient. U.S. Army. Operation Anvil Shield. The lanky mechanic blinked. "Wait, what was that?" He stepped forward, squinting. His expression shifted as he bent down. He took a closer look. "Whoa," he muttered. "Is that real?" The earbuds guy finally looked up. "What? Dude, that's a Medal of Honor plate. Like, government issued." A third mechanic stepped out from the shadows. He was quieter than the others, older than the rest. Maybe in his late 30s, oil-streaked hands, tired eyes. His gaze locked on the plaque, then on John. He took off his cap slowly. "Sir," he called out. John paused at the edge of the lot. He turned halfway back. The older mechanic walked over, less like a worker, more like someone approaching a monument. "Were you Anvil Shield?" he asked. John didn't answer right away. His fingers brushed over the patch on his jacket. "Just once." Then he gave a single nod. "I was," he said. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the music was suddenly distant. The older mechanic extended a hand. "My uncle," he said. "He served there. Never came back. I know what that patch means." John shook his hand, firm but humble. Behind them, the mood shifted. The laughter and sarcasm drained from the younger mechanics' faces. One turned off the music. Another put down his phone. A silence spread across the shop. The kind that only happens when something sacred walks into the room. And you realize You didn't recognize it soon enough. Without another word, the older mechanic grabbed a wrench. He walked toward the truck. Let's take a look. John stood quietly as the younger guys followed. This time with more focus. Not out of pity, but respect. They popped the hood, crawled under, took photos of worn-out parts. The mood had transformed. One offered John a bottle of water. Another brought out a stool. It was as if the ghost that drove in had suddenly become visible. Somewhere in that still summer air, a story began to unfold, one that none of them expected to be a part of. Here is the second part of the story. The sun had begun its slow descent. It cast long shadows across Milford's streets, the kind of golden hour light that made even rust look poetic. Tyler wiped his hands on a rag. He was still watching the bronze plaque below the license plate. Something about it gnawed at his curiosity. He wasn't one for books, but he was one for Google. Sliding his phone from his pocket, he crouched near the front bumper. He snapped a photo. The plaque wasn't just decorative. It had numbers, emblems, and a faint purple tinge on one side. A purple heart emblem, unmistakable. Next to it, a rarely seen insignia, a 5-pointed star encased in laurel, worn smooth by time. "Hey," Tyler muttered, flicking through search results. "This guy is not just some old vet." The page loaded. He clicked a military database article, then another. His eyes widened. He stood up too fast, dropping his phone. Guys, come here." The other mechanics crowded around. "His name's John Everett." "Captain John Everett," Tyler read aloud. His voice was low. "Decorated with the Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, and the freaking Distinguished Service Cross. Says he saved his entire squad from an ambush in the Korengal Valley, 2013. Was presumed dead for almost a week. They called him the Ghost of Anvil Shield." The youngest mechanic, barely 19, blinked. "Why would someone like that be out here in Milford?" Tyler didn't answer. Across the street, behind a dusty office window, Mara Weller looked up from her invoice ledger. The voices outside had grown louder, urgent. Something had shifted. Curious, she thought. She stepped out of her office, onto the shop floor. "What's going on?" she asked. No one answered at first. Then the older mechanic, Ben, turned to her. His eyes were filled with something between awe and hesitation. "It's the guy with the truck," he said. "We think he's a decorated vet, like seriously decorated." Mara squinted toward the parked rig. The sunlight hit the plate again. She froze. Her mouth parted slightly, her breath catching in her throat. It wasn't the plaque that stopped her. It was the name Tyler had just spoken aloud. John Everett. Her knees weakened. "No," she whispered. The letters, the handwriting, the carefully folded pages she'd kept tucked away in a drawer for over a decade. They all came rushing back. Her son, Corporal James Weller. He wrote about a man named John Everett in every letter from Afghanistan, not just as a leader, but as the man who saved his life, more than once, or as the one who carried him on his shoulders through gunfire to the evac chopper. James called him a guardian angel with a rifle. Tears welled in her eyes, before she could stop them. She stepped off the curb slowly, like approaching a sacred memory. Across the lot, John Everett sat on a wooden bench outside the diner. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes remained closed. He looked like someone listening, not to voices, but to the quiet hum of the town, the wind brushing the leaves, the groan of old signs in the breeze. It was the stillness of a man who had spent years surrounded by chaos and had learned to appreciate silence. He hadn't heard the commotion, or maybe he had and simply didn't care. Mara crossed the road without a word. Her steps were slow, deliberate. As she neared, John opened his eyes. They locked gazes, hers wide, filled with a storm of memory and grief. His calm but piercing, like he knew exactly what was coming. "Captain Everett?" she asked, her voice trembling. He gave the faintest nod. "I'm Mara Weller. My son, I know," he said softly, before she could finish. "James?" He carried a photo of you in his front chest pocket. Always made sure it was the last thing he'd see if he had to go. Her lip quivered. He mentioned you in his letters. Told me you carried him to the helicopter under heavy fire. John looked away for a moment, then nodded again. He didn't want to leave. Kept saying others needed the seat. I had to throw him in. Then I stayed behind. She covered her mouth with one hand. Her other hand gripped the edge of the bench, as if the earth beneath her might crumble. I thought you were dead, she whispered. So did I, John replied with a faint hint of a smile. For a while. Behind them, the others stood at a respectful distance, watching, silent, uncertain of what they were witnessing, but knowing it mattered. Mara sat down beside him, the same spot they'd shared earlier. The weight of the day had softened her features. You know, after James died, I stopped talking about the war. About him. People said all the usual things. He's in a better place, he died a hero. Time heals all wounds. But none of that helped, so I shut down. I let myself forget what he meant. And I let this town forget it too. John glanced at her, his eyes filled with empathy. You didn't forget. You just got tired of hurting. Mara blinked, tears forming again. He always said you were fearless. But I see now, you were just trying to survive. John's gaze fell to the floor. Fear's always there. Anyone who says they weren't scared in a firefight is lying. But fear isn't failure, it's fuel. You learn to move with it, not past it. A silence settled between them. Heavy, real. Then from the corner, Tyler stepped forward. The same young mechanic who had first Googled the plate. He held a small, oil-stained notebook, his eyes uncertain. Can I ask you something? He said, his voice shaky. John looked up. Sure. Tyler cleared his throat. Back there in Afghanistan, were you ever really scared? John studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Yes, he said. Every damn day. He leaned back against the truck. The metal cooled against his spine. One night, we got word that a nearby village had been compromised. Intel said enemy fighters had taken over the homes, turned them into traps. We had to clear it, one house at a time. Each doorway, you didn't know if it held a family or a trigger. You couldn't not be scared. But we kept going. Because we had to. Because the guy behind you was counting on it. Tyler looked down, silent. John continued. Courage isn't about feeling brave. It's about doing the right thing even when you're shaking inside. You keep going. That's all. Tyler sniffed, wiping at his face with the back of his hand. Thanks, he muttered, stepping back. I needed to hear that. Outside, twilight had descended. The townspeople had gathered near the sidewalk and the garage entrance. Quiet, unmoving. Each held a candle, flickering gently in the breeze. No announcement had been made. No invitation sent. It had just happened. As if the town had collectively decided, tonight we remember. John stepped outside, led by Mara. He stopped on the sidewalk. Everywhere he looked, faces, young and old, farmers, waitresses, veterans, teachers. Some he'd spoken to, most he hadn't, but they were all here. No cameras or reporters, just people, grateful people. Mara handed him a candle of his own. He looked at it for a long moment, then lit it from hers. The flames flickered together. Someone began to sing softly, an old hymn, and the rest joined in, their voices imperfect but sincere. John stood still, staring at the flame, at the sea of glowing faces before him. Something cracked inside his chest. Not pain, not guilt, but something deeper. Forgiveness, not from others, from himself, because he wasn't being thanked for what he did. He was being seen for who he is. And that, more than any medal, meant everything. Here are the next two parts of the story, continuing John's journey in Milford. The sky was still tinged with the blush of dawn. John stepped outside the small room above the garage. The air was crisp, cool, the kind that wakes you gently, like the first breath after a long night of holding it in. He walked slowly across the lot. He was expecting to find his truck mid-repair, maybe still jacked up, or missing its front panel. Instead, he stopped dead in his tracks. There it was, fully restored, polished, repainted in deep navy blue. The chrome gleamed under the rising sun. New tyres, a realigned chassis. Even the bullet dent on the door had been repaired, but left faintly visible beneath the paint, a respectful scar. A story kept. The team at Weller's had worked through the night. Tools still lay on the workbench. A few of the younger mechanics were passed out on lawn chairs, grease on their faces, jackets pulled tight against the morning cold. John ran a hand across the hood, his eyes shining. He didn't speak. He didn't know how to. Words felt too small. Behind him, Mara approached, holding a mug of coffee. "Hope you don't mind," she said with a soft smile. "We figured it was time someone took care of you for a change." John turned to her, stunned. But before he could reply, a horn honked. A small caravan of townsfolk was approaching, trucks, bikes, golf carts, all led by Mayor Kent. He was wearing a goofy, best town ever baseball cap. "Morning, soldier," the mayor shouted, stepping out with a flourish. "You got a minute? We got one more thing to show you." John furrowed his brow, confused. "More than the truck?" "Oh, way more," Mara said, grinning. They coaxed John into a pickup and drove just a few miles out of town. The road turned to gravel, lined by pine trees and golden grass swaying in the breeze. Then, tucked just off the main road, they pulled into a small driveway. The house was humble, worn around the edges, white siding, green shutters, a porch with a swing that groaned in the breeze. The lawn was overgrown, but soft, like it hadn't seen boots in years. A welcome sign tilted crookedly above the screen door. "This was the McCarthy's place," Mayor Kent said. "They passed a few years back. No family. We've been maintaining it. Figured it was waiting for the right person." John blinked, still trying to catch up. "You're saying this is for me?" Mara stepped forward. "You've been driving from place to place, never stopping. Always carrying something heavy. We see it. You didn't just lose your friends out there, John. You lost your home. And we'd like to give it back." She held out a small silver key. John didn't take it at first. His hand hovered over it, like he was afraid it might disappear. "I don't deserve this," he said. "Yes, you do," she replied. "Not because of your medals, not because of what you did over there, but because of who you are right here. You gave us something. Perspective. You reminded us how easy it is to forget, and how powerful it is to remember." John finally took the key. Slowly, like it was a relic. The crowd clapped gently, not an explosion of noise, but a soft wave of warmth. Inside the house was simple: 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a kitchen that smelled faintly of dust and cinnamon, wooden floors with scratches from time, an old quilt folded neatly on the couch. It was nothing fancy, but to John it was a palace, a place to stop running, a place to heal. Later that afternoon, the town held a small ceremony on the green in front of the community hall. No big banners, no press, just a podium, folding chairs, hand-painted signs that read, "Welcome home, John." Kids waved tiny flags, dogs barked happily in the background. Someone grilled burgers nearby, the smell drifting into the air. When John was invited to speak, he hesitated. He stood at the edge of the stage for a long moment, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the crowd. And then, slowly, he took the mic. "I'm not used to speaking in front of crowds," he began. "I've spent most of my life trying not to be seen, especially after the war. I didn't know how to be a person anymore, just a soldier, just someone trying to stay alive." The crowd listened in silence. "For years I drove. I slept in my truck. I worked odd jobs. I kept moving so I wouldn't have to feel anything too long. Guilt, loss, loneliness, you name it." He paused, his voice tightening. "But then I broke down in your town. And I thought, here we go again. Another place I don't belong. Another place that'll look past me." He looked up, his eyes filled with something raw and unfiltered. "But you didn't look past me. You looked at me. You fed me. You fixed my truck. You gave me a home." He took a breath. "But more than that, you fixed something I thought was broken forever." The crowd exhaled as one, a ripple of emotion passing through them. Some clapped softly, Others wiped their eyes. John stepped down from the stage. This time, people rushed toward him, to shake his hand, to hug him, to simply be near him. He wasn't a stranger anymore. He wasn't just a war story. He was John, and he was home. This story reminds us that sometimes the deepest wounds are healed, not by medicine, but by recognition and compassion. What would you have done if you were one of those mechanics? Leave a comment below. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers. With your help, we can hit this milestone together. We would appreciate your follow. Embrace the journey for more stories that matter. Stories